Hi everybody, how are you? We're just fixing my phone here. Doing some funny things. Alarms only until you turn off Do Not Disturb. Okay, just fixing this. How is everybody doing? It's 11:30 a.m. as promised. I'm coming here to answer all of your questions on bedtime battles in this thread we have here. Let's just see if my phone, there we go. Why is my phone being funny? I hope you can all hear me. Let me know if you hear me okay. All right, so I'm going to start at the top. For those of you who are new to the group, this is what we started. I mean, the whole group itself is pretty new. But we have every Monday, I post a question thread. And on Wednesdays, I hop on here. Going to try to make the time more consistent, but hop on here and go through every single question. So for those of you who are watching the replay, if you have a question on your question that I answer you, just hit me up on the bottom in the comments and I will come back on and answer you. But anyone who's here, can you just let me know if you can hear me? Because I'm having something funny happening here. Last time I couldn't see the comments, so I hope you all can hear me okay. There's no issues going on. All right, so I'm going to start at the top with Deborah's question. Deborah asked, other than cry it out, are there any ways to teach a toddler to self-soothe? My 20-month-old is still waking up. Oh, you hear me. Thanks, Deborah. Okay. Okay, so Deborah, you asked actually, other than cry it out, what can you do to help your toddler learn to self-soothe? Your 20-month-old still wakes up every 1 to 3 hours and wants to comfort nurse. Okay. Let's see what you wrote about your bedtime, because next week we're going to talk, Deborah, more about middle of the night wakings, but last week we talked about routine during the day, napping, which is a foundation. But the next piece in the puzzle is bedtime. And after we talk about bedtime today, next week we're going to move forward and discuss actually in more detail middle of the night waking. So let's see, Deborah, what you said. You do a bath every other night around 7:30, followed by lotion, brushing teeth, visiting with your daddy. Then he lays with you in bed till 8:30. You nurse him and you pass out. Then every 40 minutes to 3 hours, he comfort nurses. He's a super light sleeper. Okay. So this is going to be a common theme that is going to be happening with all of you and all of your questions on bedtime battles. So the biggest thing that we're going to be discussing today is twofold. Number one is going to be actually preempting sleep properly and making sure that your child's body is in an ideal state for sleep, and different ideas and routines and rituals you can incorporate, which Deborah sounds like you have. The nursing, you have the bedtime bath, the lotion. But the second component is what I like to call a sleep dependency. And this is exactly, Deborah, what your toddler is suffering from. He's dependent on nursing to fall asleep. And what actually happens, and we're going to talk about this next week for middle of the night wakings, but what actually happens is whatever tone that your baby, your toddler, your 7-year-old, a lot of you ask questions about older kids, whatever state that they are falling asleep at bedtime is the same environment that they expect to be recreated for them in the middle of the night. And that's why they wake up all night and want to be nursed, want to be held, want you to sit with them, want you to hold them, want you to rock them, want you to shake them. So what we're going to talk about now is setting the tone properly for bedtime, so that way your child is not going to be dependent on needing you at bedtime itself. And because of that, will foster more positive transitions back to sleep in the middle of the night. So Deborah, what I recommend doing just for this first week now until we move next week to middle of the night, what I recommend doing is kind of trying to separate that association between nursing and sleeping immediately. So you can still do the bedtime with the routine and the lotion and the bath and the visiting with the daddy and the nursing, but instead of both of you completely passing out, first of all, if you're tired when you nurse, that's just technically setting yourself up to be exhausted. Why is this crooked? That's just technically setting yourself up to be completely exhausted because you're obviously both going to pass out. But, hello crooked camera, sorry guys. But what I would like to see happen is you nurse him till he's really calm, really drowsy, you're not falling asleep, and then at that point, place him in his crib or bed or wherever you have him sleeping to go down. Now what's going to happen when you put him down, Deborah, is he's going to be upset. Don't leave him. Stay there with him. Rub his back, comfort him. You might even nurse him again, but the goal is that he falls asleep in his crib, in his bed, in his place of sleeping with as much reassurance necessary on your part. And after you do this, night 1, night 2, night 3, night 4, he's going to get more and more comfortable with it, and then in turn is going to learn how to sleep better throughout the night. Now, I'm not saying this is going to solve night waking. This is just the first step, but I want you to start really focusing on how he falls asleep at bedtime, still with comfort, still with you there. I'm not telling you to leave him to scream it out. I'm totally against that, which is why I created this group, and most of you who are in here understand that there are gentler methods that exist, but that doesn't mean there's no crying. It just means he might be crying because he's not being given into exactly the same way. Ocean, can you do that with an 8-month-old? Yes, and you're going to see I'm going to go through all the questions here, and it's going to be more or less the same idea that I'm telling you. Teaching your child to fall asleep without a complete dependency on you, but with still having reassurance from you. So yes, Ocean, you can do that also with your 8-month-olds 100%. If nursing is, I think you posted a question, so I'll go down there soon, but if nursing is the sleep dependency that your child has, you don't need to take that away from them. You just want to weaken that association between nursing and being directly falling asleep. Okay, so Deborah, yes, try that again. Michelle, yes, you can do that with an 11-month-old too. And that's your next question here about your 5-year-old, but definitely, Michelle, you can do that for sure with your 11-month-olds. Just try to weaken that association and still comfort them. They might be upset, but there's a very, very, very big difference between a child crying because they're, God forbid, not being responded to, right? They're alone in a dark room by themselves. Where's my parent? I would never advocate that. But a child crying because they're not being responded to the way they want is very different. Just like Michelle, your 5-year-old, which we're going to talk about in a minute, he might be angry that you made chicken for dinner because he wants ice cream, and he might be having a temper tantrum, and you might be sitting there hugging him and kissing him and telling him, I'm so sorry, I love you so much, but I made chicken. Does that mean he's emotionally traumatized? No, it just means you're not giving him what he wants. So it's a full-fledged baby temper tantrum here. So Michelle, you asked, your 5-year-old has been having a very hard time accepting bedtime. Let me make this bigger. The routine and everything. The limit is strong, and 5-7 times a week you hold to it. The limit is strong, meaning, I think you mean, Michelle, that you're very consistent. Okay. So what you do is, but it's still emotionally challenging. You have an 11-month-old and a 7-year-old. So you have a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 11-month-old. Okay, the 7-year-old routine is rock solid. Great. The 5-year-old was on board, but has always been rocky over the years. When you had the baby, your 5-year-old would do bedtime with the baby and me. And now the baby is mobile. It's not such a peaceful transition. I'm just skimming through this. The struggle is, if you start a new routine with your 5-year-old, how and why? Okay, so it sounds like, that's your bad speller, don't worry. Okay, I got what you're saying, Michelle. Okay, so it sounds like your big issue is your 5-year-old. 7-year-old is rock solid with the routine. 5-year-old was, and now that baby came around, it's messed up. And now that your 11-month-old is mobile and crawling around, it's really difficult to put them to sleep together. Sounds like what you're saying. So first of all, what I really recommend when you have multiple children is stagnating bedtime. If you're going to try to put your 5-year-old to sleep at the exact same time as your 11-month-old, and they're going to be having a scream-a-thon or a party, and the 11-month-old is crawling all over the 5-year-old while you're doing bedtime, you're just technically setting it up to be difficult. So first sit down and figure out how much sleep each kid needs. If you know your 7-year-old is rock solid, get that one down. If you know your 5-year-old requires more attention from you, then maybe it's best to put the 11-month-old to sleep first and then move on to the 5-year-old where you can designate most attention. You need to figure out how to do it, but staggering bedtime, I find, is the most successful way to deal with multiple kids, especially if they're sleep fighting. Because if they're sharing a room, it's going to be really hard for all of them to go to sleep at the same time and for you to divide yourself amongst 3 kids properly. So I can't tell you the best order to do because you have to figure out how much sleep each child needs, how much it takes with each child. But for sure, if your 5-year-old is having issues, it could be one of the biggest issues he's having is just lacking your attention. It could be, Michelle, that bedtime used to be a bonding time for the two of you where you'd sit there and read books and cuddle with him, but now you're on the floor chasing the 11-month-old and he feels disrupted and upset. So make sure that you can delegate proper time to your 5-year-old so he feels special and feels like he's getting that alone time with you, and that you're physically setting it up in a way where you can delegate proper time to put him to sleep, even if it means the 11-month-old may be going to bed a little later, or the 7-year-old. Yes, okay, so that's a big piece of advice I would give you, Michelle. Let us know how it goes, okay? Now, moving down the list, Kara. 4-year-old who wakes up at night consistently and then needs her bedtime routine restarted. So now you know why that's happening, Kara. We just talked about that. Needs the sleep environment that you give at bedtime recreated over and over, all right? Because there's a sleep dependency going on. So 4-year-olds prefers to sleep in your bed. Also is early rising regardless of bedtime. And Mary, this is your issue too. Okay, so Mary and Kara with your 4-year-olds. I want to talk about, let me scroll down, make sure no one else had a question on that. Okay, pleasure, Michelle. So Kara and Mary, I want to talk to you both about setting a proper stage for bedtime with your 4-year-olds. Now, number one, you want to make sure, like we spoke about in the routine part last week, if you didn't watch that video, try to hit that up because it talks about catching that sweet spot for sleep to make sure that you're catching your child at the ideal time his body is ready to go to sleep. Because if you're starting bedtime too late, he's overtired, going to fight it. If you're starting it too early, he's not tired enough and not going to want to go to sleep enough. There's a very limited window that you really want to try to catch to get your 4-year-old to sleep. So once you have that nipped in the bud, focus a lot on the actual wind down process. Some children need more time than others to actually get their bodies calm and allow sleep to come. Just like none of us would go on a 5-mile run and jump into our beds, some children need ample time to go from transitioning from mommy and clapping and dinner and bath and lotion and books to being in their bed. So make sure you have a good 10 minutes or so of wind down time where you're allowing your child to calm down, whether it's massage with a lotion or quietly singing or quietly in a darker room. Just do that to help get their body in a proper state for sleep, because the wind down routine that you enlist for bedtime itself is very, very much going to determine how effective your bedtime is. Once you do that, when your 4-year-olds are dependent on sleeping in your bed, what I want you to do is put them in their bed, but stay there with them, similar to what I just outlined for the 8-month-old and the 5-month-old and the 11-month-old. Rub their back, sing to them, talk to them, and let them know that I'm going to stay here for you until you fall asleep. And don't leave. Don't try to do the sneak away effect, because I've actually worked with families where the kids teach themselves to fall asleep with like the eye slightly open, or they get really nervous the parents are going to leave. Stay there with them until they're in a deep sleep and let them know you're going to do that. Anytime you hear them throughout the night, we're going to talk about next week, but you're going to recreate that same sleep environment. And the goal is, same thing, after night 1, night 2, night 3, night 4, your child's going to feel secure knowing, wait a minute, when I call out to my parent, they come right away to my sleeping space. I don't need to go get them to their sleeping space, coming into your room, coming into your bed, coming to fetch you, because they confidently know that you're going to respond to them. And what you do is progressively, over the course of time, your child will learn that you're going to come to them and you don't need to rub their back anymore. And then you phase yourself out of the picture a little bit more, which we'll talk about next week. But instead of touching and sitting right next to the bed, then you phase yourself a little bit out. Sit next to the bed at the midpoint between the bed or crib and the doorway. Then a little bit further, out, but still giving a consistent message. So what I want you to focus on now is shifting the dependency from your child coming to you, that you are coming into their sleeping space. Okay, that's for you, Kara and Mary. If you have questions when you're watching the replay here or now, let me know. Okay, Nechama. Let's make this a little bigger. Hearing other people's issues makes you feel better. Okay, good. That's also the point of this group. You have to know you're not alone here. Your 14-month-old is waking up numerous times at night to nurse. How do you train a baby that age to fall asleep? Okay. She goes to sleep and is nursed to sleep around 7. She's always up within a half an hour. Okay, Ashley, same issue that you are having as Nechama. Ashley, you wrote, your child can put yourself to sleep. Okay, so Nechama and Ashley, even though you're suffering from the same issue, you are having totally different situations. Nechama's child, baby, 14-month-old, is falling asleep being nursed. So again, if your baby's falling asleep being nursed, what did I just say a few minutes ago, is going to constantly wake up and want you to recreate that sleep environment. Nurse me every hour, nurse me every half hour, nurse me every 40 minutes. So it's just making it more difficult because your child is dependent. The key for you, Nechama, is to teach your baby how to fall asleep without the dependency of the nursing as strong. You can still nurse, but just like I told Deborah in the beginning, you can still nurse, but try to weaken that association of nursing and sleeping immediately. So nurse till your baby's calm, then put little 14-month-old in their crib and stay with them and rub their back and sing to them and shush them and touch them and really try to enlist that first phase of helping them fall asleep without the nursing, and then gradually they will get less and less dependent. But Ashley, in your case, you said that your baby falls asleep beautifully. Now, this happens sometimes that a child can fall asleep fine at bedtime, but has a really difficult time transitioning back to sleep in the middle of the night. So, Ashley, I'm focusing on bedtime now, so I want you to really post your question next week when we talk about night wake-ups. But just a little bit of a hint for you for next week, Ashley, you're going to do the same thing in the middle of the night that I just told everyone else to do for bedtime. So you can start for this week only. Before we get nitty-gritty with wake-ups in the middle of the night, when your baby wakes up, try to use other methods to enlist aside from nursing. But it can get tricky, habit, hunger. I'm going to get into that next week more. But bedtime is half the battle. So if you know, Ashley, that bedtime is smooth, but night wakings are difficult, we're going to be able to nip those night wakings really, really quickly. All right, let's see. Next. Jenny, your 7-week-old wakes up to feed around 3 a.m., doesn't want to be put back down. So, yeah, I wrote you this comment. Jenny, Try to, for a 7-week-old, the biggest preventative measure you can use for newborns is actually enlisting an awesome routine. So I want you to watch that video from last week if you didn't, about catching that sweet spot. A 7-week-old typically can stay awake, and I know I'm not talking about this now, but I have to just answer you. Typically can't stay awake longer than an hour and a half to 2 hours. So if you're keeping your baby awake too long during the day, it could make your baby wake up at night. But watch that and come to next week when we talk about night wakings more to get in more detail. Okay, Liat. You've been trying to put your 13-month-old to bed drowsy but awake. Okay, you've been trying this. He can be so drowsy, but the second you put him down, he decides to crawl or stand up. You lie him back down, he gets right back up. Sounds like Jack in the Box. Up, down, up, down, up, down. If you let him really hang out standing, then he gets wakeful, starts to become babbly, crying. What should you do? Then he wakes up a bunch of times at night. Okay, so you are trying to enlist this idea of trying to get him to fall asleep without a dependency on something, but you're seeing, Liat, that it's not working. I want you to know something. It will work, but it's about consistency. First of all, every time he stands up, every time he sits up, doesn't mean you have to let him stay there. We want to teach him to allow relaxation to come independently without needing you every time to recreate it for him. So every time that he stands up or sits up, gently place him back down. Rub his head, rub his back, encourage that relaxation to come so he won't fight it as much. But when he starts talking or even babbling or even crying, that doesn't mean you suddenly give in and take him out. Remember, the goal of this is to gently and lovingly teach your child to sleep. But Liat, if every single time he protests, you pick him back up, that's just teaching him that every time I cry, he does get picked up. It's just teaching him a new association. So stick with it. Even if he's upset, he's not abandoned, he's not traumatized, he's not alone. He sees you, he hears you, he feels you. You're right there with him. He just might not be happy about the situation. So don't give in just because he doesn't seem to be learning. You have to give this a good 1, 2, 3, 4 week or so, at least sometimes, to teach him this new association. So try to stick with it, Liat, even if you don't see it's working within one night, because one night is not a gauger. And you don't necessarily determine success on his response immediately. Success really is just consistency in and of itself, just sticking with it over and over and over in the beginning till he starts getting it. All right, Christina, let's open this up. Your baby is 5.5 months old and you started doing sleep coaching. I think you mean starting to teach him to sleep on his own. And he'll be in daycare starting in January. You're doing a gentle idea with naps at nighttime where you stay in the room next to his crib, pat his tummy. Okay, that's what I said. Now, you introduced a pacifier, even though you're not a big fan. Things have been going well for a week. But yesterday it started taking over an hour. And now it's up to almost 2 hours. So I asked you if you change anything. You said, no, the routine is simple. Diaper change, PJs, lights on, in. He kicks his legs for a while, for half an hour until he falls asleep. Then it did start getting better. Okay, so this could be actually, if you were seeing a lot of success with this and suddenly there was a regression, I always like to take a big picture as to what's going on during the day, Christina. A few things. Number one, did anything change in your schedule? Are you picking him up a little later? Are you dropping him off a little later? If he's not at daycare yet, did anything change in his diet? Try to really get a full bird's eye view of everything that's happening during his day. If nothing's changed, it's possible his sleep needs have slightly changed. So it's possible that what once was working as an ideal bedtime might be shifted or need to be shifted. He might need to go to bed 10 or 15 minutes earlier. From what you're describing, it sounds like he's overtired. So I would actually try to make bedtime a little bit earlier, because if it was smooth and suddenly he's fighting, obviously sleep changes don't happen instantaneously with a snap of a finger. Yesterday was great and now suddenly it's new sleep needs, but it can catch up. When a child's bedtime is not ideal for them, it can start catching up to them where it's just not working. So I would recommend making bedtime earlier and sticking with what you're already doing, because if you know it works for him and he does adapt to it, then it's probably just a matter of timing to kind of nip that in the bud a little bit more. Okay, let's see. Gotta have my water on hand here while I answer all your questions. Okay, Charlie, your daughter is 6.5 months. She still sleeps in a bassinet in your room. And as long as you all lay down at the same time around 9:30, you can lay down. She's awake and sleepy, and she'll fall asleep. Great. But she gets up every 3 hours and wants to nurse back to sleep. You feel like 9:30 is too late for her. She takes a 1 hour nap and a 1 or 2 hour nap each day, but she doesn't nap after she gets home at 5. You're so tired. Okay. You'd like to add that she started sleeping 5 to 8 hours a night when she was 2 months old. It just keeps getting worse. Okay. So a few different things. Yes, so you know she can sleep through the night, Charlie. You know she's capable. She used to give you 5 to 8 hour chunks of sleep when she was little. So what happened that caused this regression? As babies get older, there is typically a 4 or 5 month sleep regression. It's very common. Everyone knows about it. But why it's actually happening is twofold. Number one, your baby's body is changing, and sleep issues and sleep dependencies and all these things are shifting inside, and they're getting more aware of the world around them, and they learn, hey, wait a minute, when I cry, mommy picks me up. When I cry, mommy feeds me. This is amazing. I'm totally going to keep it up. And it's cause and effect of the world that they learn. So the regression is really just a matter of a developmental maturity that your child's starting to learn to process information around them more. So that's the first reason that sleep regressions happen. Second reason could just be completely developmental, that sleep needs change, and there's an internal shift that we have to fix something to make it better. Sometimes the regression can be from one or both of these things. So Charlie, I would say to first nip naps in the bud. First, make sure that you have a good routine set up. A baby this age typically does not need to stay awake anywhere longer than 2 to 3 hours anytime. So 3 hours is very, very limited amount of daytime sleep for a baby this age. It's not tons of sleep. I'd like to see a baby this age getting closer to 3.5, maybe even 4 hours of daytime sleep. So I would try to see, is your baby being kept awake too long between morning and nap 1 and nap 2, bedtime. Make sure you have bedtime set up at that sweet spot, because if your baby's overtired by the time you're starting, then the overtiredness is going to turn a 7 o'clock bedtime into an 8 o'clock bedtime into a 9:30 bedtime like you have, because a late bedtime like that usually shows me not that a baby doesn't need sleep, but that the baby's overtired and fighting it more. So I would try to really get a solid routine set up so bedtime can be smoother. Past that, do exactly what I told you for everyone else. She falls asleep beautifully at bedtime. But these night wakings could be caused really just from bedtime not being at the ideal time. And we'll talk about night wakings more next week. But my biggest piece of advice to you, Charlie, is to really, really focus on making sure bedtime is a time when she's not overtired. Because if she's overtired, nothing to talk about. An overtired baby fights sleep more and more and more and more and more. And there's a physical reason this is happening. When we're at this ideal sleep spot for sleep, whether it's a baby or us, our brains produce various hormones and cortisones that are distributed. Melatonin is the most famous one everyone knows about. And all of these hormones kind of reach this place of harmony in our body, and we're at this ideal, utmost sleep space. But what happens is if we miss this window, our body continues to produce cortisones and hormones and melatonin, and everything gets out of whack, and your child gets this second wind. It's when you see them start fighting sleep. You know, have you ever been so tired you can't sleep? It's exactly what's happening here. So I want you to catch your baby at a time where she's not overtired, so that way she's not going to fight it as much, because that's a really important component for a solid bedtime. Angela, your 7-month-old gets up in the middle of the night a few times. Okay, let's talk about bedtime. She goes down while she just wakes sometimes. You can cave and give her a bottle. Okay, so Angela, night wakings we're going to talk about more next week, but try to focus this week on having a solid bedtime, having your baby not fall asleep with the bottle, having your baby fall asleep with the bottle for relaxation, and then falling asleep in the crib, even if it's with your help. So that way we can kind of get rid of that bottle and sleeping association to make sure that things are in a better place for that. Okay. Lindsay, someone else just asked something. No, that was Charlie saying, thanks, you're welcome. Let me know how it goes, okay? Lindsay, your 6-month-old wakes up 1 to 2 times at night, sometimes more, and is just fussy. Once she gets her pacifier back, she's okay. Need was to teach her to self-soothe. I don't know if she just starts screaming. Okay, so what's happening here is the pacifier is become the full-fledged sleep dependency. One sec, my phone is just ringing. You could just end it. Just end it. I have my mother here visiting. She's visiting me from out of town. She's in the other room. So it sounds like the pacifier has become the sleep dependency in this case. And what you want to do is try, same thing like I spoke about with the bottles or the nursing, try to have the nursing or the bottle be just like the pacifier. And try to help your baby calm down at bedtime with the pacifier, but not with the full-fledged dependency. So she can suck on it until she's really nice and relaxed. But try to take that pacifier out just as she's conking out. So that way she'll learn to fall asleep without full-fledged sucking of the pacifier, which in turn is going to cause more transitions of sleep in the middle of the night next week. Brianne, you have too many to list. Uh-oh, let's see what you said. Okay, the issues I'm having with each child are compounded by the fact that they share a room. Okay, 9-month-old. He had a really bad fever, which caused bad sleep habits. He's having trouble getting back on track. He's doing only a 4 or 5 hour stretch. Okay, so 9-month-old, make sure the routine's set up. Make sure you have a good routine set up in a good, solid, sweet spot for sleep where he's not overtired at bedtime. And again, whatever his sleep association is, whatever he's doing at those 4 or 5 times when he wakes up at night, Brianne, try to Nail that at bedtime and try to weaken the sleep dependency so that way he's not as dependent on whatever his sleep association is, so he can fall asleep a little bit better at bedtime, which is going to set the stage for the middle of the night. Your 2.5-year-old still isn't going to sleep without a fight. He doesn't sleep through the night. He doesn't know how to relax. You've tried several techniques. He admits he's tired and asks for bed, but once he's in bed, he's wired. So if he's wired, that's a sign he's overtired, and you would try to get him to bed a little bit earlier because, like I said, even if he's tired, you should be putting him to bed before he's even showing you signs of tiredness, before he's rubbing his eyes, before he's yawning, Brienne. You want to catch him before so you can catch him at that sweet spot. Once he's begging for bed and you already see he's like conking out and getting all tired on the couch, then he's going to have a really hard time relaxing his body for sleep, of course, because he's overtired and past that window. Hormones are all out of whack. He's getting that second wind. So try to make bedtime earlier and catch him at the place, and then use all those relaxation techniques to help him fall asleep. Okay, that's that. That's the middle of the night. Then he's upright again throughout the night. But like I said, if you can nail it at bedtime with how he falls asleep, it's going to set the stage a lot better for ultimately good night's sleep. All right. And they share a room. So if these two share a room, do you have another one in there or just those two kids? Okay. It takes 1 to 3 hours in bed. Okay. Stagnate bedtime, like I just told someone else in here. Don't try to stick them both in their beds at the exact same time because they're going to have a really hard time waking each other up, having a whole song and dance, having a whole party. So try to figure out which one you can put to bed earlier, which one you can put to bed later. That way you can focus your attention on each one of them. You can focus on having this sleep dependency go away with your 9-month-old. You can focus on teaching your 2.5-year-old to relax and wind down without having to split yourself into two places, which is impossible and also means you're going to spread yourself too thin and not be successful. Okay, next. Rena. Rena says, her 7-year-old, the one I helped you with a long time ago when your baby was 3 months old. Okay, I remember helping you with that baby, Rena. Okay, but now little guy is not 3 months old and is 7 years old. So he fights bedtime. He says things scare him. He reads for ages till he falls asleep in his bed, and then he comes in, he's sleeping in your bed. Nothing works. He claims your bed is more comfy. Okay, so this, I'm going to lean back because I want to talk to you about this for a minute and my back hurts. I was leaning up looking at the computer. So this, Rena, is more of a developmental maturity kind of power struggle issue. What's going on here now with your 7-year-old, is that your 7-year-old has, yes, developmentally developed a sleep dependency on you, wanting to be in your bed, wanting to this, wanting to that, but he also knows that there's a power struggle happening here and he's winning. He knows if he puts up a big enough fight, Mama's going to let me sleep in her bed because she just gives up and lets me, then of course I'm going to stick with it. So he's totally winning. You're pulling, he's pulling, but he pulls harder and eventually wins. So what I want you to do, there's a few different things you can enlist for your 7-year-old. Number one, during the day, make him feel like $1 million bajillion and talk to him about all his friends and all the cousins and all the this and the that, and then, people he knows that are 7 years old who do not sleep in their mother's bed, because big kids sleep in their own bed. Don't knock him down for doing it. Build him up that he's going to want to do it, and call the aunts and the grandmas and this and that. Be like, you know what, 7-year-old is sleeping in his bed. He doesn't need to come into mommy's bed. He's big. Are you kidding? That's what he's going to do. And build him up, make him feel awesome in the process. Maybe take him to the store, pick out a special pillow or sheets that he can feel involved in making it his own, and something that, if he claims that your bed is more comfortable, help him buy something to make his bed more comfortable, even though he's only sleeping there because he wants the comfort of being in mommy's bed. So do what you can to enlist his involvement so he feels like he's part of the decision-making process, and he feels like, wow, my bed is awesome because I just bought this and I want to be big like that guy. And he wants it to be like a full-fledged involvement situation where he feels like $1 billion. Now, you could try, a 7-year-old's a little old to try a chart, but you could try some type of prize system and tell him, listen, when you stay in your bed at night, I'll give you this little M&M. That's probably too small for a 7-year-old. Maybe you could build up to something where you buy him something. A star every day equals a certain amount of money, and then he gets to go to the store and buy something for $10. I don't know. He's 7, so you can be more creative than if we're working with a 3-year-old because he understands the world a lot more. He's a lot more mature. But do something to make him feel like his efforts are worth something bigger. That's what the purpose of a chart is. They get a sticker, or they get a this. With a 7-year-old, he's going to want something more tangible than a sticker or an M&M. But have each day be worth a certain amount of money or something, like I said, and buy him something. Now, when bedtime comes, despite all your efforts and your positivity and your charts and your this, what's going to happen? Oh, okay, it felt good during the day, but can I just go into your bed now, Mommy? Because, I want to. Don't give in. It's not about being a mommy drill sergeant. It's not about being strict. It's about being loving and doing what he needs. For his benefit, you have to internalize that he needs to be sleeping in his own bed. So you can tell him, no, I'm sorry, I love you so much, but you're so big you're going to stay in your bed. And when he comes out, put him back in and do it over and over and over. He's not a little kid that he doesn't understand. He's not a 2-year-old. He's not a 3-year-old that we have to physically shift a pattern in their brain. He knows what he's supposed to do. He just doesn't want to. So even if he reads books in his bed initially, even if he's doing other things, as long as he stays in his bed, he is rewarded in the morning because he did what he was supposed to. And the most important thing you can do is know that you're not going to give in. Because if he picks up on a little bit of confidence lacking or a little bit of you feeling a little bit uncertain or hesitation, oh, maybe just this one time, he feels it and he will harp on it and take you for a ride. You need to know with 100% of your being and your essence, he is staying in his bed. There's nothing to discuss and he's not coming out unless there's, a fire or something, God forbid. So you should know that, and that confidence he's going to pick up from you, okay? I sat back for that because I wanted to get comfy and talk to you about that. But that's really important for older kids, is boundaries and understanding the positive structure that you're giving them, okay? Let's see. Miriam, your 5-year-old is a pro at disrupting any routine and staying awake for ages. That's number 1. Your 17-month-old is getting better but throws a temper tantrum when he wakes up in the night. The big issue is the 5 a.m. wake ups. Okay, so early rising is a separate issue we're going to talk about. But for your 5-year-old and your 17-month-old, stagger bedtime like I told everyone else. For your 5-year-old, I want you to do the same thing I just told Rena for the 7-year-old. You might need to change it a little because he's a little bit younger. But it's all about that positivity and all about those boundaries. I don't even like the word discipline because you're not punishing him. You're just teaching him what's expected of him with the technical setup. But for your 17-month-old, you want to make sure you catch at that sweet spot for sleep. You catch him at a time where his body is in an ideal place, ready for sleep, but you want to make sure that he can, whatever his association is, his sleep dependency, that he's not going to be fighting. Because if he's screaming to go down at bedtime, waking up multiple times throughout the night, you didn't write me more details here, Miriam, but it could be that he's waking up because of the sleep dependency, because he didn't fall asleep well at bedtime, but it could be he doesn't have his daytime structure set up well enough. So I would try to make sure that bedtime is set up properly and naps for your 17-month-old, because if that's all out of sorts, he's going to wake up a lot at night to being overtired. Overtired, remember, can mean not getting enough sleep or sleep not being distributed evenly. So it could be he's getting enough sleep, but it's not the right time. So I want you to check out his daytime routine and figure out what's best for him. Like I said, for your 5-year-old, the healthy, confident boundaries that you give him. Samantha, you have a 7-month-old. You did a form of cry it out. By the way, if that works for you, that's fine. There's no judgments here. Whatever you feel is best as a parent, I fully support. I'm just giving you alternate methods. But cry it out doesn't always work. Let's see what you said. You did a form of cry it out, so he's able to fall asleep on his own. So that's awesome. You have bedtime set up. He falls asleep on his own, Samantha. But he wakes up 2 to 3 times at night to nurse. He's exclusively breastfed. How can he be weaned from night nursing? Okay, so we're going to talk about this next week. Could be I even told you that. Hang on. Yeah. Next week's thread is going to be all about night waking. But I would pat yourself on the back and take yourself out to dinner that he falls asleep on his own at bedtime. I'm telling you, be more than 50%. I was thinking of a number, 75% should I say. But I would say 3/4 of the problem is the bedtime. So if you have that nailed, Samantha, you're doing awesome. We're going to talk about night wakings next week. Ocean, okay, here's your question because you asked a question before. Your 8-month-old twins, okay. 6.5-month-old developmentally. They're on opposite schedules. One wakes up 4 times at night and the other 1 to 2 times at night. You're on your own. You have no help. You're losing your mind. Okay, that sounds exhausting. So number 1, Ocean, I think you came this week after we started our thread that we had last week on daytime. Daytime is the foundation, so you want to get a good routine so they're doing the same thing at the same times. When I work with multiples, I work with twins a lot. I've worked with triplets twice, and I've worked with quads once. My friend had quads. So it was a little bit crazy, but with all forms of multiples, you want to get them on the same routine as much as possible so that you can have a general flow to your day and you can have confidence to know what their sleep needs are without feeling like you're giving this one a bottle while you're putting that one to sleep and then bedtime is here for that one. If that one just woke up from a nap, it gets really overwhelming. So try to get them in the same groove of the same schedule, which means starting in the morning. Wake them up at the same time. Get them on the same napping routine. Babies their age, I wouldn't like to be kept awake for longer than 2.5 hours any given point throughout the day. So try to make sure they're taking 2-3 solid naps a day around the same time and do whatever you can to get that set up so that bedtime is at the same time. That's what we're working towards with all the daytime sleep. It's the goal is bedtime at the same time. Once you get bedtime at the same time, then focus on how they're falling asleep, right? Focus on, are they falling asleep having bottles? Are you rocking them to sleep, Ocean? Are you doing this, a song and dance, bouncing, whatever it is? Try to help them calm down, but weaken that association of the sleep dependency, whatever it is, and actual sleeping. And even if it means you sitting there with a hand on each of their backs, rubbing their backs to sleep, that's fine. I just want you to do whatever you can to help them. So that way, ultimately, next week when we talk about night wakings, they can learn to fall back asleep on their own with a lot more bottles. Okay, so give them the bottles, Ocean, before they go to sleep without falling asleep with it. And then use all these other tactics we talked about to help them fall asleep. And we'll talk about that next week more, what to do in the middle of the night. But you got to get them on the same bedtime structure first, because that's the key. Rachel, I'm not even sure where you should begin. You struggle with naps and bedtime sleep. This isn't a nap Q&A, but I thought it might be able to paint the picture. Your 3-year-old will not take a nap. The only way you can sometimes get him to nap is if you are driving or he happens to fall asleep in the car, but at a terrible time around 4. Yes, welcome to the beauty of 3-year-olds. My 2-year-old, she's 2 years and 3 months now. I am very sad to say she is ready to give up her nap, very much so. And I know it's hard when they get rid of their naps, but let's see if that's what your issue is. Okay. Some days it seems like he can nap, but the lady who watches him 3 days a week get him to nap every time at 1 p.m. like a champ. He'll sleep for 2 hours. Well, this is long. It's okay. I'm happy to read it. Let's see. On days he naps, he won't go to bed till 9:30 or 10. Days he doesn't nap, he'll fall asleep around 7. You get him to sleep, you lay in your bed. Okay, from everything you're telling me here, my dear, sounds like your 3-year-old's ready to give up his nap. Now, I want you to know when your child is transitioning from needing the nap to not needing the nap, he's in this like in limbo period where his body's not yet ready for it. So of course he's going to fall asleep in the car or fall asleep somewhere else because for his whole life he's been used to taking a nap during the day. My goodness, I'm an adult and I get tired around 4 p.m. Okay, he's a little guy, so his body can't stay awake as long. So be mindful of that and make sure that if he falls asleep, you try to wake him up right away or try to schedule your errands so you're not in the car. Why he's falling asleep consistently at 1 p.m. with this nanny or daycare, whoever he's with, you know, it's hard to say, but try to have her keep him up because consistency is way more important. I don't want him napping 3 times a week when he's with her and then staying awake and conking out at 4 p.m. and going to bed at midnight when he's with you. That lack of consistency during the day is going to throw off bedtime and his nights for sure. So I know he's not sleeping through the night, which we're going to talk about, but I'm going to tell you that the biggest thing you need to work on now is getting rid of that nap and having bedtime be at a consistent time. You don't want bedtime sometimes at 7 p.m. and sometimes at 10 because that day he napped and this day he fell asleep in the car for 45 minutes and this and that. Get bedtime consistent by getting rid of the nap, even if it means it being a little bit uncomfortable and keeping him awake in the afternoons, because if he's consistently not falling asleep till that late with a nap, likelihood is he's ready to give it up. I'm sorry to say, I'm going through the same thing with my 2-year-old. I haven't even had one of my kids be this young, ready to get rid of a nap. Usually I like to keep the nap closer till 2.5 or 3, but she's ready for it. And it's disrupting bedtime with all my other kids because she's sitting there singing in her bed and screaming and making a noise, not unhappy, but really loud. Last night was till 10 p.m. And my poor,